So just briefly, what is it? So we're talking about improving the rate of energy intensity so that we to double, which is about 4%. We A lot of people complain about energy intensity as being an indicator for energy efficiency, but in broad terms, it's what we need to use because it's what we can track most easily. We all understand that beneath that there's a lot of detail we also need to be looking at. So why should we be doing this? You know, what will motivate governments? Sorry, I realise I'm covering up the screen. That would be very helpful to me. What will motivate governments to actually do this? So doubling is a critical path on the net zero pathway, which many governments around the world have agreed to. Has massive potential for reductions of CO2 emissions. It can really reduce energy bills in homes around the world, but in advanced economies, we reckon by about a third. It can create 4.5 million jobs, more than today, and the energy savings are equivalent to twice those of the EU's consumption in 2022. So when we used to talk about energy efficiency, people used to worry that it was, you know, small things, small fry. It wasn't as important as some of the other things that we could do. But these are big numbers. These are really significant opportunities. And this is why we think that we can motivate governments to actually to get on and do this. We wanted to have a look, though, at how doable it was. You know, is it really possible for countries to do this? So we just had a look at what had been done in the past. And basically, over the past 10 years, almost every country has doubled energy efficiency progress at least once. And some countries have done it many more times than that. Sorry, there should be numbers on here. But you can basically see that some countries have done it as many as 4 times over the past 10 years. So, you know, we wanted to look at this to show that it can be done. The other thing we wanted to look at is where are those savings? And I'm not going to go into this in detail, but we need all sectors to contribute. It's industry, buildings, transport, the supply sector as well. And I'm sorry, these slides were working perfectly well earlier, and they seem to be having a bit of a problem now. But what I wanted to show here is for doubling, not for the 2050 targets of decarbonisation, but for the doubling target that we're talking about, across all sectors, technologies already exist. We're not looking to invest in silver bullets, in something that we don't yet know about. We have technologies in the marketplace. So it's slightly disconcerting not being able to show you the slides properly. But basically, we have a series of technologies here. The green line is telling us what we need to achieve for net zero. And these are things like cooling, vehicles, and general appliance energy efficiency, electric motors. So we've got all of those items that are very important to our net zero pathway, where we have these bars are showing the kind of average or the range of efficiencies already on markets, with the diamond being the median, but the green dot, which is always above, is the best available today. And then, like I say, the green line is what we could be going for net zero. So just to show that in order to double energy efficiency progress, we need to triple investments. That's globally. But in terms of emerging and developing economies, which is where we are doing a lot of our work, it's a huge amount more investment than that's needed. Just briefly, looking at what we think as the IEA, what we find is necessary. We need actions across all sectors. We need to think about things like the multiple benefits, things like the jobs that can be created. We need to engage all parts of society. So we have these kind of 10 guiding principles that we observe to be very important where countries are doing really well on energy efficiency. And then just finally, based on all of this experience, we've started talking about the need for policy packages, because we've seen where countries use tools like regulation, information, incentives. They often use them separately. They're designed separately. They're not even designed to work together. We used to even have the case for minimum energy performance standards, say on appliances, where the label and the minimum energy performance standard didn't relate to each other at all. So we now understand much better that we need to design policies to work together as a package, and that's where we've seen the most effective energy efficiency policy rollouts. So I just wanted to use this slide, you'll see it again over the few coming days, as a framing for the conversation. We will have presentations now which cover all of these kind of sections of policy that we need to see implemented. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. I think we'll try to figure out also what's happened to the slides so that people can have access to it, because it's a very informative slide. So I've seen it in its natural form, and it very powerful in terms of what we need to do to double the progress on energy efficiency. So and a lot of these are also available online, I think, so we can share with you later on. So thank you very much, Mel, for your presentation. So it's now my pleasure to invite our second presenter, who, in my view, will be presenting one of the best ESCO programs in the world. I've been following this ESCO program since I've been at the IEA. And so I did insist with the Korea Energy Agency that we'd have somebody presenting it, because I think it's a very good blueprint for what we can do in other countries with government support. So it's my pleasure to invite Seung Jung, Assistant Manager for the Korean Energy Agency, to deliver the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sun Young-jung from Korea Energy Agency. I'm in charge of the ESCO program. Today, I will share with you the ESCO in Korea. So let's begin. Before I explain the ESCO program in Korea, I first explain the government funding in Korea and why it was introduced. This is because ESCO in Korea has been developed and led by the government through loans. After the oil shock, we all understood the importance of energy efficiency. So the government introduced the Energy Conservation Fund in order to promote users to enhance energy efficiency. This loan policy evolved through time, and in 1991, the ESCO was introduced as a solution to promote energy efficiency facilities. Now, I will explain the current situation of the Energy Conservation Fund. The current budget of $220 million is used in two sectors: the ESCO investment and the energy-saving facilities. The two sectors will be explained in detail further on. The loans are provided to users who wish for energy-saving facilities. These loans have better conditions and interests than the user bank loans. So it's a great option to users, and the goal of enhancing energy efficiency is achieved. So these funds are only given for certain energy-saving facilities and projects. There are now 87 items on the list of fundable facilities and projects. Among these items, the above are the most commonly used. This list is kept up to date. Items that are outdated get deleted, and new technologies are added if they are useful. Now we move to the part of how the loans are processed. The government is at the beginning of the system. It procures the fund for the loans as well as the necessary legislations. With that, the KEA manages the program in its practice. When the KEA gets a loan application, we evaluate the application and issue a letter of recommendation for the loan. The applicant delivers this letter to the bank, who in turn gives out the loan. The bank is also responsible for collecting the loan. Now we will have a look at the ESCO. ESCO is short for Energy Service Company. ESCO normally means two things in Korea. The first is a type of company specialized in energy saving services. They carry out services such as energy audit, project proposal, installation, and so on. The second definition refers to a business model. It's called the ESCO investment project. Sometimes a user wants to invest in renovating his energy consumption model. Here, the ESCO can provide technical and financial solutions to the user. Then the user collects his investment fee and profits through the energy saved. Also, the ESCO guarantees the savings. As a result, the ESCO executes the program, procures the fund, and guarantees the effect from the energy savings. So the advantage is that the user can find means to upgrade his energy usage method. And this is done with the help of ESCO professionals and loans to lower burden. There are 4 projects that the ESCOs utilize to help users: replacing energy savings facilities, greenhouse gas reduction facilities, energy audit result improvement projects, and other projects that would result in over 5% of reduction effect can be in our program. Now we move on to the contracts for ESCO investment projects. There are 2 types depending on who applies for the loan, either the ESCO or the energy user. The common factor is that the result of the energy savings is guaranteed by the ESCO. If the reduction of energy is less than the guaranteed amount, the ESCO finally makes up the shortage. When the target energy saving level has been overachieved, the excess amount can also be finally shared according to the contract conditions. The first contract is called the Guaranteed Saving and ESCO Financing Contract. The ESCO applies for the loan to invest in energy users. Then, by guaranteeing the energy savings amount, the ESCO collects the investment. When the energy user is procuring the fund, it's called the Guaranteed Saving and User Financing Contract. The user secures the fund, and the ESCO only guarantees this energy savings. Both contracts must have the ESCO to guarantee at least 80% of the target energy savings. Next is the general process of the ESCO project. The ESCO goes through an energy audit to find and propose improvement. Based on this, a contract is made. When signing the contract to replace the facilities, the ESCO and the user decide who will get the loan. Then the ESCO carries out the installation as per the contract. After the installation, the ESCO guarantees the energy savings. Also, the ESCO is in charge of the maintenance. It's usually called the MRV. This includes training for the facility operation and other maintenance related to the energy saving. After the installation is complete, the user pays of the initial cost in instruments created from the energy saved. Once the money invested for the contract project is fully collected, the ESCO contract is complete. Once the money from this point on, all profit from the energy savings are all for the users. To be registered as an ESCO by the government, there are some requirements. Both corporate and individual businesses can be registered. The business must have at least 3 technical staff who are nationally qualified engineers. As for equipment, the minimum requirements are listed here, but in the field and more the better. To keep the legislation in effect, it's important to continually carry out ESCO investment projects. The ESCO registration system started in 1992 with 4 ESCOs. As of the end of year 2023, 241 companies are registered. The rapid increase started in the 2000s. In 2013, to promote new projects, the registration requirements have been relaxed and more ESCOs have been registered since. The ESCO registration are annually reviewed. Thank you for listening. I hope this presentation will be of help to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Seong-Jeong, for your presentation. And also, just to highlight the key role that the government can play in terms of first step, ESCO certification, and then other ways of bringing in guarantee products as well, and supporting in terms of capacity building is very important. And so this program has gone, as you've seen, since 1992. It's gone a long way. It's got some ups and downs for several reasons, but I think it's a simple process that can be easily replicated in other countries. Yes. We'll have Q&A at the end, so we've got about 30 minutes for that. Thank you. Our third presenter is Sanat Kisti, Director for Industrial and Services Sectors, Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority. He will share the specific energy consumption benchmark regulation in Sri Lanka and how better access to data is so important and monitoring are important parts of setting good energy efficiency policies. Sanat, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David, for the introduction. So I'm going to present the energy consumption benchmark regulation in Sri Lanka, what we have introduced very recently. Let's see what is energy benchmarking. Actually, benchmarking is the process of evaluating and comparing the energy performance of the facilities using standard metrics. But in our regulation, mandatory energy submission is there. So once we receive the data, I think we can plot the frequency distribution like this. Yeah, frequency distribution like this. Then we will share that distribution with the stake relevant authorities. So they can see where they are located. But unfortunately in our context, because data sharing is not possible, because private sector organization, they run their own program. We don't know what is happening next door. So I think that provide valuable feedback signals for the performance on their tasks. And also it's a kind of effort for self-awareness of the position, and also to encourage people to go for more and more energy efficiency activities. We are planning to introduce some kind of rating system in our benchmark regulation, right? So when come to the status of the benchmark regulation, initially we targeted two sectors, like retail sector and financial and banking sector. If you look at the sectors, when come to the retail sectors, we have 7 main chains, including 1 government-owned, and totally we have 700 numbers facilities. When come to the banks and financial, we have about 60 facilities, around individual facilities, 4,500 around facilities in the country. So when we initially introduced the sector prioritization, we consider the homogeneity of operation, because when come to the banks, they start at about 8 and close 5. So we try to make a simpler manner. So that's why we picked those supermarket and banks. And also we consider they represent both government and private sector. So we can learn what are the obstacles, what are the barriers when we introduce benchmark regulation for other sector. That's why, because both financial and supermarkets, they represent both government and private sector. And we consider, is there any potential considerable energy saving potential in those sectors? And if you look at those sectors, financial, and they are not very keen on energy efficiency. They pass burden to the customers. So that factors also we considered. And also finally, financial capability, because at the moment in country, there is no concessionary loan for the energy efficiency implementation. So energy efficiency implementation will happen because those who are not comply, they have to go for the mandatory energy auditing and implementation. So financial access to the finance is very important. So we consider that also. And two sectors, we targeted about 2,360 gigawatt hours by 2030, right? So when come to the legal provision under the of this regulation, actually we implemented this regulation based on the Sustainable Energy Authority Act 35 of 2007, because powers has been vested to the CA to attend this kind of regulation. So I'm not going to read each and every section. We can see most of the section, right? By going through the most of the section, because in that regulation there is mandatory energy reporting and point of energy manager and mandatory energy auditing, right? Likewise, so many things are included. So we went through the act, and accordingly we draft the regulation and do the implementation. So when come to the mechanism of the regulation, because as I mentioned earlier, SCA enforce the regulation, basically two sectors, financial sectors and banking sector. In that regulation, there are schedules. I will discuss later. And in that regulation, facility manager, he is the one who is responsible to comply the target, comply the benchmarking. And also there is one important person, energy manager. Energy manager, his duty is to submit the data to the SCA, regulatory authority, right? Normally, in our context, there is some institution, there is no capable person, because according to we have energy manager regulation. In that regulation, there are some certain requirement to be an energy manager. So in that some institution, there is no capable person. So in that regulation, we allow companies to hire other third-party person to be a energy manager on behalf of them. And also, they have to submit the, as I mentioned earlier, the report, they have to submit the consumption data quarterly. But if they are unable to, submit the report, SCA has power to employ either energy manager or auditor to visit that facility and get the data, right? Because you can see if they, if they operate in a specific level mentioned in our regulation, they comply. If they are not comply, they have to conduct the mandatory energy auditing and they have to provide the plan of action to the SCA, right? And right, and also to encourage the people, facilities on their energy initiatives. We in that regulation we do some rating system. We introduce some rating system to encourage the facilities on their achievements. And as I mentioned earlier, in that regulation, there are 3 schedules, schedules 1 and 2 and 3. In schedule 1, it describes what are the facilities that we include in that regulation, because the categorization is based on the ISIC classification, that is in the International Standard Industry Classification, and benchmark to be achieved is given in the schedule, and set of formats, data submission format also included in the schedule. But initially, actually, when we introduced this regulation, not voluntary basis, we try to get the data through Google form, but it's not difficult, it's not easy task. So fortunately, the USAID and the Sri Lanka program, they help us to develop very sophisticated web portal, so that we can, the facility from their end, they can upload the data, and SCA side we can receive data and we can analyze the data required manner. In schedule 2, there are information is there how they submit the energy data. Because for example, nowadays in Sri Lanka, people are very keen on going for solar. So not only the grid electricity consumption, if they have a solar system, the solar generation, if they have diesel generators, those data, and building area and operational data, that type of data is has to be required to submit those the data schedule details are given in that schedule. And schedule number 3, under schedule number 3, rating system, how we design, how we assign the star rating is mentioned under schedule 3. Right, when come to the, then we will look at what are the offenses and consequences and winners and losers, because according to that regulation, failure to submit energy consumption data or information as per the prescribed in the schedule is a offense, right? And other thing is failure to conduct the energy audit, because suppose you think the facility, their consumption level, specific energy consumption level is higher than the benchmark value. So they have to go for the mandatory energy auditing. Unable to conduct the mandatory auditing is a offense under this regulation. And also reduce the energy consumption up to that level is also offense. The consequence, the fine as stated in the act, right? And because at the moment we are receiving the data, but we don't have full set of data. Once after, I think after 1 year period, we can analyze the data, right? And analyze the data, and we see who are the companies who comply the regulation, who are not comply the regulation. So 10 best performing facilities will be announced in the newspapers, and those who are not performing also planning to publish in the newspaper. Important players, actually in our regulation, there are 3 important players. One is facility manager. He's the one who is responsible to comply the benchmark regulation values in his facility. And energy manager, his duty is to submit the energy data. And energy auditors also we require, because in the event of if the facility is required to conduct energy audit, there should be energy auditors. So those they are the three important players in our energy auditing regulation. Challenges, actually, big challenge is getting difficult to get in facilities on board, because at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, we have 60 number of energy banking facilities. Right now, only 16 responded. So that's type of problem is there. Energy data reporting and monitoring is also challenge at the beginning, but fortunately, USAID helped us to develop a full web portal. And resource limitation also one of the best difficulty, because human energy managers, but somehow we allow companies to hire external parties. That's how we tackle that problem. Energy auditors, at right now we have only 26 number of energy auditors. We are expecting more and more energy audits. So that's why we are in the process of revising our existing regulation and trying to include some sub-layers like energy coaches and energy assessors, so that they can go, a simple system they can analyze, give the report likewise. Because in industrial cases, we have your compressors, chillers, that type of knowledge is not necessary to go for the building. So that's why we are trying to include some sub-layers. And access to the finance, that is also big problem. Actually, recent past, we worked with the World Bank and managed to approve USD 108 million, but due to the IMF bailout package, it's not realized. So most alternative sources are welcome. And other thing, challenge is setting a benchmark, common benchmark, because setting a benchmark for the building is very easy, but if you look at consider garment sector, because garment sector, some garment, they produce ladies wear, some produce men wear, some using air conditioners, some are not air conditioned. So setting a common benchmark is very difficult. So in that case, I think we have to given the benchmark for their own we have to set their own benchmark. And recommendation finally, right? So if you are going to start the benchmark regulation like this, I think my suggestion is to first go for the simple operation, consider simple operation and homogeneity of operation, and having commonly comparable benchmark, as I mentioned, because we can start with building, because for example, building, we can use kilowatt hours per square meter per year, like very simple, not that difficult, right? And if the building facility is having more potential, then we can pick. And financially strong, because they have their own finance capability initially. And other important thing is having central data submission platform like web portal. It's very difficult, because if you are getting a lot of number of data, manual processing is not that easy. And mandatory program is always suggested, because we tried initially, tried to voluntary, but it's not success. So my recommendation is go for the mandatory and strengthen enhanced resources like human and measuring equipment. That is also important, because calibration cost and purchasing equipment is very expensive. And finally, concessionary loan. Right. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Sanat. So the idea of the presentation was so that you have a glimpse of all the steps you need to take to set up an energy efficiency regulation. I think particularly like to highlight that benchmarking is quite useful, particularly for the industrial sector, especially if you want to enhance competitiveness. So like a garment industry, for example, and so that they can see where there's energy efficiency gains in Sri Lanka. Of course, tea industry as well would be an easy benchmark. And so it was more to see the process, the penalties, the needing to build capacity. And I think I think we have a lot of government people here in the room. So a lot of the governments are on this journey. I was just chatting with João about Cambodia, where they're just very much in their beginning of their journey. Philippines, I think, definitely building that capacity to be able to undertake the energy audits that are needed in the country as required by the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. So the idea was to share the Sri Lanka's experience and what's happening there, particularly with benchmarking, and again, Mel, I'm sure Mel will mention this several times. It's so important to have access to good data so that we can make good policy decisions. Last but not least, we have our final speaker before the panel discussion. He's a champion for energy efficiency in the Philippines, and his team and himself as well have been working hard to implement several of the regulations under the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. Unfortunately, he can't join us today, so he will be in virtual mode, but it's my pleasure to have the recording from Patrick Aquino, Director of Energy and Utilization Management Bureau, Philippines of the Department of Energy. Thank you.
Strengthening energy efficiency and conservation through demand-side management. I'm Director Patrick T. Aquino of the Energy Utilization Management Bureau from the Department of Energy. Allow me to provide a brief overview of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation EEC implementation in the Philippines. The Energy Efficiency and Conservation EEC Act or Republic Act number 11285 institutionalizes energy consumption improvements and provides incentives for energy efficiency projects to make it a national practice in the Philippines. The EEC Act establishes policies for the efficient energy utilization, increased use of energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies, and defines responsibilities for government agencies and private entities. Several policies have been implemented in support of the EEC Act, including the Minimum Energy Performance for Products, the Philippine Energy Labeling Program, the Government Energy Management Program, Designated Establishments, Certification and Registration of Energy Service Companies, Fiscal Incentives for Endorsed EE Projects, Energy Efficiency Excellence Awards, and Certification of Energy Efficiency Practitioners, and recognition of training institutions, among others. Corresponding to the following: energy efficiency requirements for designated establishments or those identified as energy intensive in the commercial, industrial, and transport sectors. Savings from energy efficiency projects initiated by designated establishments reached 696 gigawatt hours in the fourth quarter of 2023, equivalent to around 5.01 billion pesos. There are also energy service companies or ESCOs whose projects reached 610 gigawatt hours in 2023, amounting to 6.46 billion pesos in various EE projects. We also have EE practitioners, 776 certified energy managers, 172 certified energy conservation officers, and 259 certified energy auditors. The remaining items for implementation is on demand-side management, the minimum energy performance for sectors, which we do have a draft which underwent public consultation earlier last week, as well as waste management. We also have the Philippine Energy Labeling Program, PELP, the National Labeling System for Energy Consuming Products based on energy performance. As of the end of April, there are 150 registered companies, 7,505 registered products, 8,024 energy labels issued, and 2,942 certificates of exemption issued. We are also implementing the Minimum Energy Performance MEPP for products, under whose obligations include the sale, lease, and import of MEP-compliant energy-consuming products is required. Coverage of the MEPP are room air conditioners, refrigerators, lighting products, and standby power requirements for television sets. In alternative fuels, we are implementing the Vehicle Fuel Economy Labeling Program and the Vehicle Fuel Economy Performance Rating. The implementing guidelines for the composition of the technical working groups to develop the particular product requirements for the same was made effective earlier this year. We expect to have the Vehicle Fuel Economy labels in vehicles towards the end of 2024, with strict implementation starting 2026. On the government sector, we have the Government Energy Management Program, The most recent issuance pertaining to it was Administrative Order Number 15, with its implementing guidelines coming into effect on February 15, 2024. To date, cumulative savings from the GEMP reached 31,179.22 megawatt hours and 528,392.39 liters. Monitoring indicate that there have been 1,180 energy audits, 1,118 energy spot checks, and 3,640 government entities reached by information education campaigns, trainings, and meetings. Forthcoming issuances under the EEC Act include the integration of the Guidelines on Energy Conserving Design of Buildings 2020 edition with the current Philippine Green Building Code with the Department of Public Works and Highways, the minimum energy performance for sectors wherein we had public consultations last May, the waste management, recycling, and disposal, wherein an implementation issuance is forthcoming on the part of the DOE. The demand-side management program supported by the United Nations Office for Project Services or UNOPS. The anchor circular will be undergoing public consultation in the coming months. The forthcoming DSM or Demand-Side Management Program development would include DSM training, the review of regulatory frameworks, a multi-stakeholder consultation approach, a review of case studies, and of course, more public consultation. The vision is to support the creation of a resilient, reliable, efficient, clean, and affordable electricity system leading to economic and social as well as technological goals, the meeting the load profile objectives with the strategic conservation, load management, and demand response options. For its mission, the government's objective is building an energy-efficient nation, facilitating increased use of renewable energy, supported through but not limited to the following: reduce energy consumption through enhanced efficiency in domestic, commercial, industrial, public, and municipal sectors, strategic load management through permanent load shifting using time-of-use tariffs, active load management in the form of demand response to balance the supply-demand gaps and to integrate higher levels of renewable energy. Three main approaches for each strategic intervention would be: 1. Strategic conservation, to influence through mass market initiatives. Public procurement, stimulating greater penetration for energy-efficient models related to appliances like lighting, air conditioners, refrigerators, and motors. On the permanent load shift, identification of renewable energy generation reflective time slots that show the lowest wholesale electricity spot market prices and implement a large-scale load management initiative with distribution utilities that result in peak demand reduction nationwide. And lastly, active load management, undertaken through demand response initiatives via distribution utilities that create a large-scale pilot and mainstreaming programs to result to the reduction of the national peak demand and the identification of load-reflective end-use ramping up and ramping down of end users in both the government, industrial, and commercial sectors. Although the target of each strategic intervention is under review, the strategic conservation will directly contribute to achieving the national energy efficiency goal as outlined in the National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Plan and Roadmap. The working implementation approach for the DSM program would include the DOE as the primary entity driving the implementation of DSM policies and programs, with the updating of the DSM circular for DSM development, financing, and implementation. The DOE will be setting up the DSM Facilitation Committee as well as the DSM Program M&E Committee, whose goal is to work with distribution utilities and energy zones to implement the DSM policy and programs. The ERC will provide support through existing DSM programs on time of use and ILP, as well as the introduction of new DSM programs. The ways forward include the implementation of DSM programs that promote the most efficient appliances spearheaded by the DOE with active load management that are managed by the distribution utilities. Implementation plan will be in a phased approach over a 5-year period, with phases 1 covering years 1 to 3, overlapping with phase 2 years 3 to 5. During the initial 5-year period, all or almost most of the 152 distribution utilities would have the opportunity of implementing an appropriate DSM program. The priority actions during Phase 1 would include load and market research program that ensures that distribution utilities know what priority DSM programs are suitable for their franchise areas. Increase consumer EEC awareness program, the strategic load management through existing DSM programs of the interruptible load program and the time of use tariff, and DSM program design and implementation training for distribution utilities. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Patrick. So a lot of work is being done in Philippines, and it's a pity we don't have him here today with us to tell us a bit more and answer your questions. But nevertheless, a lot of the information is again also available online, and I think there's colleagues here from the Department of Energy, so I'm hoping that some of them can answer if you've got any questions. So with that, that concludes our 4 presentations. We're just running a bit behind schedule, but we'd like to now move to the panel discussion. So I'd like to invite our 4 panelists. First of all, João Aleluia, energy specialist at ADB, who's working closely with the government of Cambodia on energy efficiency and energy transition. Atita Vivatin Pino, manager of Advanced Energy Systems, USAID Southeast Asia Smart Power Program, and Momita Chandra, senior associate from CLASP, and Mel Slade as well to join the panel. I have some questions to kick us off, and I'll also, we've got about, I think, 45 minutes, so we'll invite members of the audience to join us by raising your hand or submitting your questions through the ASEF Events app. I think there should be an iPad around, and so people can submit their questions and vote for their favorite one. Again, just please indicate your name and organization when we get to that point. Maybe first of all, before I sit down, I'll do it from here. We can start with João. And my first question to kick us off is Cambodia has made strong commitments on energy efficiency. We heard some of them today by the minister himself. Can you tell us a bit how ADB has been supporting the government in meeting these energy efficiency goals? Thank you.
So, good afternoon, first of all, and thanks for having me in this panel. ADB has been supporting Cambodia on several dimensions of the energy transition, from solar development, crowding in of private sector investment, on policy and planning. And energy efficiency has been one of the core dimensions of this support. And as David mentioned, for those who attended open plenary, energy efficiency is one of the main pillars of the energy transition in Cambodia. So we've been supporting Cambodia, and in particular the Ministry of Mines and Energy, on energy efficiency since the very beginning or almost. So we started in early 2020, shortly before the pandemic, with a market study to assess opportunities for demand-side energy efficiency. And pretty much at the same time, we were requested by the government to support them in setting up policy and a regulatory framework for energy efficiency. Up until then, it's not that energy efficiency was not recognized in policies and regulations, but it was a bit on an ad hoc basis. So there was not a dedicated policy or act or regulation directly supporting energy efficiency. So the very first step in this direction, and where we were requested by the government, was to come up with a national policy. A policy on energy efficiency that could fulfill 2 main goals. There were more, but essentially 2 goals. One, that could set a direction for energy efficiency in Cambodia with tangible targets for different sectors. And second, that could identify instruments that could be used to support the achievement of those goals or of those targets. So this was the starting point. ADB provided technical assistance support to develop this policy on energy efficiency, which was formally approved by the Prime Minister at the end of 2022. This was the first step. And then, so the government has taken, let's say, a sequential approach. So the priority was to first have this overarching policy that could provide a direction, and then go step by step on more detailed instruments and regulations. So the immediate next step was to develop what we call an umbrella framework to support a standard and labeling program focusing on electrical appliances in the form of a sub-decree that was eventually approved by the Prime Minister, so very high-level sub-decree that could lay out an umbrella framework for maps. So this sub-decree was approved in September of last year. And since then, we have been supporting them on the next step, which is in the development of regulations for minimum energy performance standards. And we are supporting them on 5 appliances: ACs, refrigerators, comfort fans, LED lights, and rice cookers. These are the appliances that account for the largest share of energy consumption in the residential sector. That's why they have been prioritized. So, this is work that is ongoing. I'd like to note that in this process has been very important to understand the market. To collect primary data, to understand in the form of market surveys, to understand, for example, what are the appliances available in the market? Where do they come from? Where are they imported from? Are they manufactured in Cambodia? Do they come from elsewhere? Do they have any label? Do they have any information on energy consumption? What about awareness of consumers to labels? Are they aware? So over the last 4 years, we have supported the Ministry of Mines and Energy, conducted such surveys. The latest one was end of last year, beginning of this one, which gave us and gave the ministry a very important primary data that has been that has shaped the preparation of these minimum energy performance standards. So this is to give you an overview of the support on the policy and regulatory side. We have also another dimension. I will not elaborate on this because it's focused on policy, but we have also been looking into financial instruments that can support developing a market for energy efficiency, especially to address a market or a segment that finds it difficult to access cheap finance, in particular local small and medium-sized companies. But in the interest of time, let me just stop here and hand back to David. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, João. It's a great example of how ADB can support governments with their energy efficiency policies. So we can provide technical assistance, bring expertise to help set up the basis for the policies, but then help also in specific regulations as well. And we've done it in the past also with building energy codes and in other areas. Moving next to Atita, maybe what I'd like to ask you is in just 3 minutes to tell us a bit about the work you're doing. And I believe you have a slide that we'll be putting up showing, and you can use it so to explain the good work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Atita Viwapinyo from USAID Southeast Asia Smart Power Program. We based in Bangkok. Today, SVP, we do a very small study and would like to share that to you. Today, we would like to share about energy efficiency bulk procurement case study from Argentinian municipality. So as you may know very well about the energy efficiency challenges, they are including invisible benefit, small investment size, and most of us limited of the capacity in terms of technical capacity, and also it's always lack of the trust between stakeholders. So one of the tools that can help to address to that challenges is um, demand aggregation or bulk procurement that I would like to share to you today. So we think that the demand aggregation or bulk procurement can help to increase the investment side of energy efficiency project, and they can improve the purchasing power for the one who want to implement the project, and also raising attractiveness to the banks. And when we think about that, we found one case study that would be good to be replicate to our region. So this is established from Argentinian municipality, supporting mainly from Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. They work together to establish the trust fund. So the trust fund act as a center organization that helped municipality to decide the bulk procurement tender project. So they put together, identify the technology selection, that work together to decide the technical specifications so that you can ensure that you have a good technology. And also they aggregate the requirement from municipality and announcement the tender. After getting the winner from technology provider, so technology provider can implement the energy efficiency project to the municipality members, and the trust fund will pay the investment cost to the technology provider. So, and I would like to highlight here, not only the trust fund who act as a technical arm for ensure the bulk procurement successful, they also provide the knowledge sharing or capacity building to their members. Like for example, they help the member to identify the energy saving potential. So the member who has a very limited technical capacity can start to implement the energy efficiency project. And they also act as a focal point organization to receive the support from international organization, and also get the knowledge transfer from international practice and transfer to South-South knowledge sharing to their members. So that another key success factor from this case study. And so from this kind of mechanism, SPP are going to introduce the mechanism to Bangkok Metropolitan Administration to implement this mechanism to their residents, because BMA they already pledged that to reduce greenhouse gas emission from energy sector by 16% by in 2030, and they also show a very strong leadership and the commitment to reduce the greenhouse gas, and their own engineering department also very active staff and very convinced to do this thing. So that the future activity that SPP would like to support to the BMA in Thailand. So I would like to pause here, and maybe we can have a further discussion in the Q&A. Over back to you, David.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Atita. Public procurement, of course, is a very powerful instrument. ADB has also been helping in India on energy efficiency bulk procurement, particularly for LEDs with Super ESCO there. And I think we have a lot of people here in the room that have been doing also very busy trying to do bulk procurement in other countries, and hopefully we can have a bit of discussion on the achievements and the experience. Next, I'd like to ask Momita Chandra to, in 2-3 minutes, tell us a bit about the work you're doing in India, and I think there's a slide as well illustrate. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Momita Chandra, representing CLASP. So, as a part of CLASP work, we provide technical support to Bureau of Energy Efficiency in India in terms of providing end-to-end solutions to Bureau on appliance efficiency development. Apart from that, we also try to ensure the compliance of SNL appliances in India at ground level. So I will not take much time, but I will just run through the slide which was presented my back. Like I have bifurcated the India's journey in terms of enabling affordable cooling through India's appliance efficiency policies into few sectors. Before starting that, at first we need to understand why affordable cooling is so important in India as well as in South Asian countries. I'll just give you some brief background on this. Like in India, summer stays at least 7 and 8 months in every year. And the average temperature in India is around 40 to 45 degree during summer. So yeah, affordable cooling is a necessity, not a luxury. So for this, Bureau of Energy Efficiency in the year of 2008 has launched its standard and labeling program for the ceiling fan under voluntary phase. And in the year of 2022, it took almost 14 years to get this program mandatory. Apart from that, just to by recognizing the effort from all type of stakeholders side, in the year of 2023, BE has also launched one voluntary program for different type of fans. It's called TPW fans or table fan, pedestal fan and wall mounted fan. Through these two policies, Bureau is almost capturing India's 90% fan market, if we see. So as I just mentioned, like it's just like 14 years journey that India did just to make this program from voluntary to mandatory. There are few parameters and few challenges which India faced during this journey. Maybe I can touch upon a few. When we launched this program in the year of 2008, there was a limited technology in terms of having higher efficient ceiling fans in Indian market, which is called BLDC technology. Manufacturer used to import these technologies from outside. There was also some resistance from industries and manufacturers side in terms of manufacturing those higher efficient products due to cost expensive of those products because people will not buy it. Apart from that, there was also some limited awareness amongst the consumers in terms of the benefits of using those higher efficient products. So to overcome these challenges, BE has already conducted so many campaigns for end users, so many trainings for end users, and BE has been doing retailer training program for since last 8 to 10 years, just to train retailers who are the forefront side in terms of selling these energy efficient products at Indian market. Apart from that, Bureau has already consulted several times with different kind of stakeholders like manufacturers, test laboratories, fan associations, just to keep this program more affordable. So through this, we kind of like achieved this journey, and we are successful by making this program mandatory in the year of 2022. Through this program, we are also anticipating to achieve approx 12.6 billion units of energy till 2030, which will be equivalent of 9 million tons of CO2 that will be avoided till 2030. And this will also kind of save approximately 412 billions of USD towards end users if they kind of use higher efficient ceiling fans or TPW fans. And last but not the least, this will provide the access to affordable and sustainable cooling to all type of end users. Maybe I pause here and maybe we can discuss our next steps during the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Momita, and it's also to telling us about India's experience and and the achievements to date. I would like to pass to Mel. I've got a question, particularly for, of course, you've explained all the work that IEA is doing in terms of research and policy toolkit, but you're actually working with countries on the ground to help them, and particularly in Southeast Asia. So could you tell us a bit about the support that IEA is doing, providing on the ground in each country, and some examples of your achievements to date? Thank you.
Thanks, David. So we're on the third generation of the Energy Efficiency Policy Toolkit, and whenever we start working with a country, we talk through that policy toolkit. We kind of use it as a checklist to see what's there, what has been thought of, what might be adapted, what's missing. So it's a framework that's quite useful for assessment. And then we think about where the IEA's got some particular knowledge or specialism where we think we might be useful. Quite often we'll say, okay, well, there's an issue with standards and labels here, but CLASP will do a better job of that than us. So, you know, let's ask CLASP to do that. You know, we're looking around to see what partnerships can be forged, but then where can we add something? And I suppose one of the focuses in recent times has been what we might see as the modernisation of energy efficiency policy. So obviously we need the basics. We need the basics right. We need building codes. We need appliance standards. We need fuel economy standards. But when we're looking at increased ambition, the ability to absorb more variable renewables, we need to think about our energy efficiency policies as well in that context. So in Southeast Asia, we've been looking at what it would take to develop codes that would enable buildings to be connected to grid. You know, so what would you need to do to adapt your building codes so that you could have a two-way communication, use your buildings as storage, as well as make them as efficient as possible, these combined objectives. Likewise with appliance, so we would suggest that no new building code should be developed without considering how you're going to enable this two-way communication, so that you can use the storage potential, you can use the opportunity to load shift with buildings. Likewise with appliances, you know, we would prefer not to see any new MEPs that doesn't include some form of demand response capability. Because even if every country's not ready yet to avail of that benefit, you can't do it until you've got a population of appliances installed in people's homes in order to be able to then initiate these new policies. So we need to develop that stock of appliances and buildings that enable us to do that. So that's a particular interest, and that's something that really needs to be done on a regional basis, because as we heard this morning, there's a lot of effort in harmonising regulation for power systems, so we don't want different regulations when it comes to the ability to do this kind of grid connection. That would be difficult for manufacturers, and it would be difficult for all sorts of service suppliers if the region were to be disaggregated for these new requirements. Other things, for example, we've been doing a lot of work in Indonesia on heavy duty vehicle standards, and that's, you know, it's a kind of a bit of a blind spot for standard development. There aren't that many parts of the world that have heavy duty vehicle standards. Trucks are going to stay around much longer than a lot of other vehicles, and they're causing a great deal more pollution than a lot of other vehicles, and therefore, you know, focusing on those is important. They're going to be much more difficult to electrify. So there are, you know, it's looking for those points where we think there's a gap, we think that there's a problem. The other one that we're starting to do more work on is electrification of the lighter industry requirements for steam generation and for drying. If you look at low temperature process industries like textiles, like food and drink, like pulp and paper, some chemicals, there's a huge need for the understanding of how to electrify some of those processes. And if I may say, it's getting very, very little attention. You know, everybody talks about the hard to abate sectors. Everybody's talking about steel and cement. which is important. But I think with all of the money and brain power that's going into those sectors, those problems are going to be solved. Whereas in the sort of medium intensity sectors, there's very little activity. So we're looking for those options, those problem points.
Thank you, Mel. It's great that IEA is keeping an eye on the blind spots and areas where there's a real need for support and to advance further to get us on the doubling of energy efficiency progress by 2030. We have about 15 minutes, so I really want to open it for Q&A. I see already many questions. I'll just ask you if you could let us know your name, your organization, and just be brief so that we have, I saw about 5 or 6 hands, so if we give enough time for others. So I'll collect 3 to 4 questions in one go, and please just let us know also who you're directing the question. So I know the gentleman at the back there, you've been wanting to ask a question, yes? I think got Thomas and Grayson Hefner after maybe, and I think as well from Tash, yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Amr Barghouth. I'm with Thematic. We implement donor-funded programming, and I work in the sustainable energy transition practice. My question is related to enforcement. You know, policies are as good as the country's ability to enforce those policies, and specifically on the example from Korea with the ESCO. You know, for contract, when there's disagreements between the ESCO and the end user on the contract or the savings, how is that resolved? Is there an agency that looks into that, or is it part of the KEA's scope? I'm just curious, because in many countries, you won't find that capacity to arbitrate and to do the contract enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Grayson. Thank you.
Hi, Grayson Hefner from the USAID Southeast Asia Smart Power Program. 2 quick questions, one for Joao. So what's distinctive about the Cambodia Energy Efficiency National Plan is that it's reflected in the Power Development Plan, which is unusual. But that kind of begs the question of making sure that you evaluate the progress of the energy efficiency programs because it's much more difficult than generation plans to keep track of. So maybe if you can address that. And Melanie, just real quick, energy efficiency is such a sprawling enterprise. I'm excited that you have an energy efficiency toolkit. How do you fit all of it in the toolkit, and how do I access it?
Okay, Thomas, and I think we'll take the other 2 as well, so we'll take 5 questions.
Right, so I'm just kind of quickly, I'm in Indonesia, and I chair the energy working group for Eurocham, and we put together some policy recommendations in Indonesia. I just want to share the 2 that I feel are critical, and then ask Mel how IEA has considered them, okay? So the first one is, it's, you know, I'm where the rubber meets the road. I've done projects, and I've offered 2 projects with industrial customers in energy in Indonesia, where they're saving $5 million a year, and I was in ESCO, and I had the capital to put up $10 million, and they wouldn't do it. Either one of them wouldn't do it. So, and there's many other end users I've talked to, and the fundamental point I want to make is that there's a huge gap in demand for energy efficiency. The end users fundamentally do not want to do it. They'll do it if you have to do it, but they're not going to do it otherwise. So it leads me to one of the policies I think is critical, and that is policy either mandating energy efficiency, to your point, with enforcement, which is a big problem, or putting significant financial incentives to make them want to do it. I think it's a critical policy and gap that I see globally. I mean, in all the things you're doing, Mel, the capacity building is all well and good. We developed certified investment grade auditors in Indonesia, M&V specialists, but the problem is there's no demand for their services, okay? So it's kind of like what comes first, the cart or the horse, right? In this case, the horse, and I think it has to be driven by demand, because if you get a policy in that drives demand, I promise you the private sector will figure out how to get the capacity to do it. I promise you. And the second thing is, and I said this in our earlier energy efficiency session, is the other thing we're mandating is a policy for the government to mandate energy efficiency in their government facilities. Mandate. That's, I think, a critical policy because, again, everywhere you look globally, where ESCOs have thrived, energy efficiency has thrived, it's where it's being driven and promoted and illustrated by the government facilities.
Thank you, Thomas. We'll take another two, okay, so very quickly, and then we'll let them answer, and then if we have time, we'll go to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Akash from AAA. I have two quick questions, one for the presenter from Sri Lanka. Particularly thrilled to see benchmarking getting its due. AAA and our partners, we've been really trying to get the government's attention in India to benchmark our commercial buildings with little success, but happy to see that our neighbors have actually cracked it. So I just want to know from you, what KPI do you use to benchmark malls and banks? Is it energy use normalized by gross floor area? And if yes, how do you actually set the initial benchmarks? So that's my first question. And the second question is to the panelist who spoke so eloquently about the work being done in Cambodia. And Momita, you mentioned the India Cooling Action Plan. I just want to briefly mention that the ICAP experience was crystallized in the NCAP methodology, which was then exported to other Southeast Asian countries, one of which was Cambodia. And that was used to develop the Cambodia Cooling Action Plan. So my question to you is that in your experience, have you come across the Cambodia Cooling Action Plan, and how is it being implemented? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Naveed Ahmed, and I'm Director Buildings Energy Research Center, Pakistan. It's a kind of a newly founded institution or organization to help implement the energy efficiency in buildings in Pakistan. I'm happy that we have colleagues from Sri Lanka, India, sharing their experiences of energy efficiency. I have been following this, the journey of implementing energy efficiency standards in buildings across South Asia. I find it like a great synergy between all of these countries because we share the common topology of buildings and also the climate regions. So I would want to have a common forum or a common policies for this region where, we define the common intervention for buildings, the common benchmarks for buildings. It will be good to have this competition between buildings across this region to adopt these policies on a common framework and implement it. Because, we are working independently in a particular area. The same work is being done in India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. We all know that lots of energy consumption from buildings is going to come from these areas because, in all of these countries, there is going to be lots of construction. So, yeah, I'm just proposing or suggesting to have this common forum for buildings energy especially. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have 5 questions, so we'll kick off. I think for the ESCO program in Korea, there's no real enforcement. It's just tools that are there for ESCOs to use, for the banks to use, the energy users to use. So I don't think, but maybe you'll have to check with the person presenting. I think she'll have to check it as well. But to my knowledge, there's no enforcement specific there, just providing the tools for the market to run. And then I know, Jean, you've got 2 questions on Cambodia, including one on Cooling Action Plan. I think there's one question on Indonesia, on mandatory, so maybe Mel and also Momita, and the Sri Lanka benchmarking. Maybe I'll ask you to come over in a bit, Sanat, to answer that. And of course, maybe Mel and Momita, you can talk about the regional building code. So Jean, you want to kick off with your 2 questions you got?
Yeah. So there are 2 questions. First, Grayson, you asked about the Port Development Master Plan that has embedded an energy efficiency target, which is indeed fully consistent with the target of the National Energy Efficiency Policy. So you can track progress on the 2 at the same time. That's the advantage that associated with having the 2 documents being developed in parallel. Your question, I think, was on how this can be tracked. So it is indeed a very good question, and the Ministry of Mines and Energy has been asking our support because you need, first of all, to have access to data. So to track implementation. So data from the power sector, in the case of Cambodia, is not difficult to come across. It's readily available. But more broadly from other sectors, that is not so easy to be obtained. For example, the Ministry of Mines and Energy still relies on the estimates of the IEA for their own energy balance. But anyway, this is something that is being discussed under the new National Energy Efficiency Committee that is now in the process of being finalized by the government. So one of the aspects that is mandated, this National Energy Efficiency Committee, is on how you monitor, how you track progress on energy efficiency and how you collect data. That's number one. Number two, on the cooling action plan, yes, we know very well about the cooling action plan. It's a document that was led by a different ministry, the Ministry of Environment, but it's very consistent with the national policy on energy efficiency in terms of its main prescriptions, in terms of, in particular, in terms of maps, in terms of an energy management system, in terms of the priorities. So I would say that if the national energy efficiency policy implemented, you are also implementing the main guidelines, the main recommendations of the cooling action plan. I would like to note that this is some sort of a roadmap. It's a plan, whereas the policy is an instrument that is stronger. So I would say that the action plan actually complements the national energy efficiency policy, and it's actually quite consistent with it. David.
So maybe Momita and Mel on I think the Indonesia sort of mandatory and voluntary. I think there's a lot of experience on that.
Maybe.
Briefly, yeah. I think we have about five minutes, so yeah.
So, Tom, I'm with you all the way on the mandatory approach. The problem at the moment with Indonesia is convincing the government to mandate, and so that's why we go for the analysis of the potential for job creation, all of the things that we know they care about, in order to try and show the benefits of energy efficiency as such that it's worth mandating. But it is difficult. They really do respond to industry saying the lights will go off, factories will shut down, and we need to provide better data, better evidence against those arguments. Yeah, absolutely. So the Industrial Energy Efficiency Policy Package, which is the one that I'd complain most about, is got regulation that's somewhat weak. It's missing information showing people what to do, and there is no incentive. So without the incentive, I don't think we're going to see a big change. So that's the conversation we're trying to have at the moment, but it's an uphill battle. Then just on the buildings point, we're at the moment cataloguing building codes from all around the world. And we would have suggestions to make as to what a good building code should be made up of, both in terms of the basic building codes we know about now, but also this concept, as I mentioned, of grid connection. So we've got a methodology, if anybody wants to look at it, that's been tried in the Southeast Asia region for saying what the kind of readiness for grid connection is, and what countries need to do, and that's all in a publication. I can share a link to that if people want to have a look at that. And of course, Grace, and the toolkit's on the IEA website. As are the training materials, by the way. So the policy training that we do regularly. The last one we did in Southeast Asia was in Indonesia late last year. Early this year, and that's all available on the website.
Thank you, Mel. Momita, do you want to come in on some of the questions?
Yeah, so maybe in terms of making it mandatory for any policies, in India, we also do have another step. It's called MVE, monitoring, verification, and enforcement of that policy at ground level as well. So we recently developed one guidelines for conducting market surveillance and ensure compliance at state level, at ground level, so that no product that gets sold in the market should not have any fake label. We just developed one guidelines in consultation with Ministry of Power and Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And we are also kind of working with other countries in terms of ensuring this compliance at ground level, just to keep this enforcement at ground only. Apart from that, I just heard from Pakistan side, like we should have one regional harmonization for energy efficiency buildings. In India, we already have developed one energy conservation building code, and that is already in advanced stage. We have considered 4 major parameters in this code, and we will definitely try to look into this code, how we can collaborate with Pakistan in future, or maybe with South Asian countries in future, so that we can also support these countries, and maybe we can be on same path, just to kind of check maybe in near future. Thank you.
So just to remind people, also CLASP is active in some areas in Pakistan, so
Yeah.
that it might be a good moment. They can
Absolutely.
connect you with the team that is there. Just to, I think we just have one minute, unfortunately. So very quickly, the last question to Sanat to respond on the benchmarking.
You asked about the benchmark value in our regulation. Actually, in our case, we use 180 kilowatt hours per square meter per year for both cases. But now we realize that when come to the supermarket, some supermarket, they include the refrigeration load into within the premises, so they are not in a position to achieve that. So probably we have to revise the later. But banking sector, it's possible. But when we consider the area, we exclude the car park. Without car park, we consider the all other areas. When come to the energy, as I mentioned in my presentation, we consider both solar PV generation and grid electricity and diesel generation. I guess I answered to your question.
Thank you. So fortunately, we have the 30-minute break, so it allows you to network and ask more questions. Apologies that we're not able to answer all the questions, and I know some other people wanted to ask. So this pretty much concludes our session, and based on the discussion today, I'd just like to say that we see that there's a range of energy efficiency policies available, which it takes time to implement, but we were able to highlight what it requires, the achievements and the challenges, and some of the lessons learned and recommendations as well, highlighted by many of you. Several of these policies can and should be replicated in your countries to ensure we can meet the goals of the COP28 to double progress on energy efficiency. So please join me in thanking the speakers and panelists today.